Hey friends, so I have a channel update for Money Monk, and this is something that I'm going to start doing more often to give you updates on what I'm focused on for the channel and how that impacts my content, and ultimately what it means as a benefit to you for watching and who really the channel is for. So I have a problem, and I've been playing my content too safe. And what that means is that I've felt rather uninspired by what I'm creating. And I get overly critical and in my head, and I'll make a video, redo it, delete it, never share it. And ultimately, what that means is that there's a lot of time that goes by where I'm thinking about making content that I just don't. And I want to share a few reasons why that's happened. So, one of my biggest videos, it's really kind of funny, that got me to a partner with YouTube where I start making a little bit of money, which I'll share in a separate video, was a video on Fidelity's cash management account. And it's ironic because when I first started Money Monk, I want to go back to the origin of what I I built this channel for. It's taken me a few months, but I think I finally clarified a bit what this channel is and what I'm focused on. And really it's focused on helping people where I was 15 years ago who came from a working class background or a middle class background and are really the 99% of Americans that just feel like you're behind on money or you don't understand it or it feels like money is something that works against you in life rather than helping you. And the reason that I built Money Monk is for a few reasons. So, from my experience, coming from someone that had very little to being able to early retire and moving up corporate hierarchies in business and seeing really the disparity between how people at the top echelons view money and wealth and ultimately power, and the stories that regular people are told about money and ultimately how that impacts life and how you're successful with it or not. I realize that there's just such a gap in understanding of what wealth is and how you build it that I wanted to be a voice in this personal finance world, which I also have a problem with because so much of personal finance advice today is stuck in a world that doesn't exist anymore. So when I look at 2025 and I see mass displacement with AI, wealth inequality that's just exploding, and the real change in how people are expected to work. For instance, company I came from, right before I finally left, the CEO said something in a big employee event, which I found a bit shocking, but not surprising. And he said something to the effect of how really the new work order is that you are going to work until you die and that that's something that you should love. And then he goes on to say, well, that's because you're growing and you're interested in building new skills and I'm a CEO and I'm always learning. What I realize is that there's these one-sided money conversations that happen in the world that are very top down. So like who decided that you needed to work until you die? Who decided that we're going to do away with pensions and force people to, really manage on their own with 401ks? Um, who decided that we're going to get away from careers where you have job stability for 20 or 30 years so that you have consistency in income and you're able to build a life? And then who decided, as jobs go away, I was a vice president and we were looking at a 30 to 40% employee reduction because of AI. So, okay, so you get rid of 30% of your workforce and you displace them with AI. So then what happens is then you move to like gig jobs or gig economies where masses of people are displaced. And then it gets harder and harder to build wealth because you don't have a stable income. And then money is always fluctuating in your life. There's not a lot of stability, and then you cut away, safety nets like healthcare. It just gets harder and harder and harder to build wealth. And then, my background was always focused on this American dream of you work hard and you build a skill and you work harder and harder and harder to hopefully make more money, and then that will give you a decent life. But I think a lot of people know that that doesn't really work. If you look at the world that we're living in, where most people live in debt, most people don't even have $1,000 saved, or most people don't have any wealth outside of, if they were lucky, that they bought a house and they watched their house appreciate. So a lot of their net worth is coming from their house. They don't have many other assets, which we'll talk about. So even if you're not one of the displaced, working class people, and you're middle class, or you're working, really hard to build a life for yourself, which is, what I did in my career. I think what is misunderstood in personal finance and not talked about is how hard it is, and how much harder it is getting for most people to build wealth. And the biggest issue I have is that personal finance is clouded in kind of this toxic positivity. I watch some money gurus, they, like, just be rich, just live a rich life, just make a high income, and then just do the things that you love with money, and, save a little bit of money, and you're going to be okay. Or other advice, and I'll say him by name, like Dave Ramsey, like the Dave Ramsey approach, is filled with judgment and shame towards people who are in debt, partially because of the decisions they make in life. Yes, going into debt is a decision. But what I realized is that there is no education for any American. In fact, I had to go spend thousands of hours learning about money and wealth on my own after going to a business school and graduating successfully, and after going into business. None of the things that I learned, in my middle 20s and then grinded my way through forward, really ever gave me the right perspective on money. And so, it's ironic to me that people have to go scrounging through YouTube or to a guru to get, you know, authentic, truthful money advice that helps them in their situation. And so, going back to Dave Ramsey, the problem that I have with it is people are not educated about what to do with money through no fault of their own. There is a massive industry and system around companies making a lot of money off of people going into debt and encouraging consumerism. For instance, like, I think I haven't bought a car on a loan in a long time, but I think now loans are at like 8 years. And so, people are financing larger and larger purchases that build no wealth, cost them a ton of extra money, and like afterpay and all these things, like buy now pay later. What's happening is companies are squeezing people for every cent that they possibly can to deliver more value to shareholders of companies to drive profit. And that's why you see massive increase in asset appreciation in investments. So if you're someone like me that was able to save, 60 and 70% of their paycheck and dump it into investment accounts, I have done very well in the last 10 years because the companies that I've invested in are doing well because of the massive amount of cash that's being dumped into the economy. And ultimately, going back to the consumer, how they're squeezing consumers for everything that they're worth. And even now, if a consumer can't pay, for a $50 meal, they're financing it so that they can continue to extract value from them. And these are all decisions that the consumer makes. But what we don't understand is the trade off around money that you make when you make bad purchases with debt, and the alternative that you could be making, and how to build wealth, and how wealthy people think about assets and liabilities and debt. And so for me, the problem with Dave Ramsey is, first, it's just a place of like judging and shaming people for the money situation that they're in, even though they've never been given the tools on what to do. And then it's generational debt. Poverty is sticky. It takes like one sickness to go into debt when you're living paycheck to paycheck. It and then everything's more expensive. So if you can't afford a nice pair of shoes, you buy a cheap pair of shoes, those wear out faster. Everything's harder. So, the wealthy person who has a nanny to take care of their kids is a lot different than the person that has to work a 12-hour shift with overtime, who's trying to take care of a kid and then having to commute on their own. I just fundamentally don't buy into the kind of pick yourself up by your bootstraps judgments that happen where we look at what a system was, say back in the 1970s or 1980s, where it was more achievable to earn a career, have a consistent, job, 20, 30, 40 years, have a pension. And then if I put everything I just talked about aside, the problem with it, it's teaching people that you need to kind of judge and shame yourself into making positive actions with money. And that's not a sustainable way to be successful. So what I'm focused on and where one of my big mindset shifts was when I first started getting into money was I can't be miserable all the time. So I have to find this balance where I'm happy with my money. I'm living a good life in the moment while working towards a positive future. And so I don't think people should be, self-flagellating or torturing themselves because they're in debt and they just need to eat lentils for the next 5 years until they're out of debt. Then the other problem is none of them talk about what wealth actually is and how to build it and how to think about it. And the problem I have with that is that there's rules for you and then there's rules for the wealthy. I'll just put it like that. So Dave Ramsey, I didn't know this. He's worth $700 million, and a big part of his portfolio, I was looking up, is all from commercial real estate. Which, he claims that he didn't buy it on debt. Like, okay, good for you. So you were one of the like one out of 10,000 people that had a successful business. You made a ton of money on your own, and then you're able to just go buy buildings. And then you're leveraging that to make even more money. Great. That's not realistic for most people. And so then there's advice about like, don't use debt. There's there's right ways and wrong ways to use debt to be successful. And if you use it wrong, you can blow up, and that's Dave Ramsey's focus. But the problem is that if you listen to Dave Ramsey and he tells you, don't buy a house unless it's 25% of your salary, and wait until you can pay 20% down, and only buy in a 15-year fixed mortgage. In this world, most people will never be able to do that. In fact, that's not the way I bought my house. I bought with 5% down on a 30-year fixed loan, and I found ways to subsidize the mortgage so that I barely paid any money on my own, which I can get into to real estate in a different video. But anyways, the problem is that none of these people really get into how to build wealth, and really, I think calling a spade when we get into the fact that most people are struggling and building wealth is really, really hard. and and it doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it, but it's not easy. And I think that's going back to the toxic positivity, and the problem that I have is that, you see all these kind of cute videos like, save $100,000 and everything blows up. You can look that up. It's like everything changes at $100,000. And I did one, to be fair, around like $10,000. But going back to the channel update, I've been playing my content too safe. I'm not sharing my own voice, and the reason that I did that is because I wanted Money Monk, and I still want it to be a place that's positive and uplifting and a safe place for people that are just trying to figure out what to do with money and need help. Find a place that is authentic, it's not judgy, and they can find success while acknowledging the challenge of it and the bad mental health outcomes that are coming from the personal finance space. If you fill your feet up with get rich quick, how to open a business and become a millionaire, um, and just all the other finance videos that are really just telling you how easy it is and showing you a lifestyle of ease and comfort, and kind of showing you what you don't have but you want, you have to realize that that is all kind of a scam. And there's good advice out there, but most of it is trying to sell you something. And the problem is all social media, you look at something online, and depending on how long you look at it, the algorithm's trying to keep you hooked on continuing to scroll, continuing to watch ads, and continuing to buy stuff. And it's going to show you what is most emotionally impactful. And so the things that are most emotionally impactful are things that appeal to greed and helping make things that seem hard in your life, like money, seem really easy. And so you because everybody wants a life raft. Everybody wants a way to kind of get out of the situation that they're in because most people are all in the same situation. They don't like their job, they're in debt, things are getting harder and harder with inflation, everything's costing more. And all around the world, it's like that. And people are, I think, since COVID, they're more angry. So you kind of look for an escape. It's like, well, how am I going to get out of this problem that I'm in? Well, nobody wants to really hear, I think, how difficult it is. And maybe that's good. I think the positive part is like people need hope. um, but when it comes with this idea that like you can just pick yourself up by your bootstraps and it's a message to someone that is already struggling, then when they're not successful using whatever they're watching online, like a get rich quick, buy this crypto stock, flip it and you'll be a millionaire. When that doesn't happen, then you feel like you're in an even worse spot. and and again, because wealth is not talked about correctly in most spaces, we're not connecting kind of long-term outcomes with what you need to do in the short term and making it feel like these little steps you're making in the moment are working towards something bigger. So, I'm a runner, a marathon runner. And so an analogy would be I do like a 2 mile or 4 mile run. It's a really small, boring run, but it's part of a bigger training system where I'm upping my mileage every week and I'm running farther and farther and farther so that I can run a marathon. It's kind of the same thing with wealth. It feels like it's really slow and it doesn't and it's really hard to connect. I saved $10. What does that have to do with me, becoming a millionaire a long time from now? Or I'm making a tough trade-off decision where I'm deciding to not buy the thing I want to buy right now because I'm working towards a vision for my future. It's really hard to have those trade-off decisions even when you understand wealth, and it's even harder in a culture where people don't understand wealth and there's an encouragement to just spend money. So then you just kind of feel stuck, and I think that's where most people feel stuck with money. And then it's just the same repeated money advice like live below your means, blah blah blah. It's all kind of, in a lot of ways, it's kind of lost its meaning. At least it did for me, and it took me a long time to, once I figured out I had a money problem, to actually get on the path to being successful. I spent like 3 years kind of struggling with like how to fix what I'm talking about. So the channel update is a few things. My videos going forward are going to be a little bit less scripted. And what I mean by that is I was torturing myself for the longest time about how to say things correctly. When I got into YouTube, I'm not a social media person. You can torture yourself the same way you can torture yourself with money about like how to make a YouTube video correctly. And there's all of these YouTube gurus out there that are going to tell you like how to do it. You have to grip people in the first 10 seconds. Your thumbnails have to be, really pithy. And, people are just scrolling and you have to capture attention. And here's what you have to do. And you have to tell these stories in a certain way or they're going to lose attention. And, so like there's this whole game around just talking. And for me, it became really demotivating because basically I was just tearing all of my content apart. Um, ultimately it's not enjoyable for me. And so I think what I'm going to start doing with my content is it's going to be less scripted. And if people want to watch it, great. And if it's not interesting because I didn't position it the right way, then okay, that's fine too. Then maybe nobody will watch my videos. But, frankly, I think I have a lot of good information to give, and I'm giving it away for free. So, hopefully people would want to watch. The other part is, a lot of my content, it's been safe because I wanted it to be a positive place. And so I didn't want to call attention to kind of the negative situations that people really find themselves in. But then what I'm realizing as I'm thinking about it more is that that's not being honest. It's not really being honest because I know what the struggle is. And what I've realized in trying to be kind of just another money person in this money space, it's not really my authentic voice. And so what is my authentic voice? So I view money in four ways. And what I'm going to start trying to do is bring all of these things together in each of my videos. So money, there's a mindset and behavior around money and how you think about it that influences everything that you do. And I didn't realize how deep that went until I spent years kind of studying that and learning that. And what do I mean by that? So like the relationship that you have with money. So if you think about money as like another person, and you know what a bad relationship looks like, you don't like to talk to that person or you try to avoid that person, versus what a good relationship feels like. You want to talk to that person, you want to be open, you want to be vulnerable, that person can support you. Well, that's kind of like the script that we have with money always running. And there's all these scripts that you build throughout childhood and throughout life around money that you have to look at and you have to learn how to change so that it's more positive in your life. Okay, so that's the mindset. That's probably my favorite part because I think, I mentioned I'm a runner. I've done wrestling, combat sports in the past. Anything that's hard, ultimately the mindset of how you approach the the sport or the effort, even in careers, whatever, it all comes back to your mindset and just continuing to be able to do the hard work. So then the next part is the social element of money, and this is the part that nobody really talks about, but our culture is so counterproductive around how to build wealth for regular people. It encourages consumerism, it encourages debt, it encourages you to not think so hard about money and to kind of make it seem like a dirty thing that, like, if you worry about money or if you're in debt or if money's not easy or if you don't have an easy life, that you've failed somehow. So, you scroll Instagram and all this stuff and you see people on yachts in these fancy cars, and that is all designed to sell you on a product, and then they make all of the money and then they build wealth while you're stuck kind of chasing something that's not real. Then the third part is tactical, and tactics are what I love to talk about. It's really easy for me as a finance nerd because I like spreadsheets. I like the cold hard numbers, like you can just find truth and fact in, math. And so, that's really fun when you're like looking at bank bonuses or credit card bonuses or what investment accounts should you build, and what brokerage should you pick. And the problem for me with this channel is that I originally started with my authentic voice when I talked about, how do you see a dollar, these different mindset focused things. And then I released this fidelity video that has 400,000 views now, and it's a reason that this channel has made money. And I kind of listen to the YouTube gurus that are like, when you have a video blow up, just give the audience more of that. But the thing is that I made that video just to be a helpful tactic, but it's just surface level and it's not what people really need to transform their situation. And so then I just did other videos like, oh, I'll talk about T-bills or I'll talk about taxes, all good tactics. And you need to build the tactics to build wealth. But it's missing kind of this framework around money in your life, which is much deeper, which is what I'm focused on, because I'm not focused on surface level advice that ignores what you really need to do to be successful. Again, going back to my background, someone that grew up poor, rural, didn't have anything, and had to scrap for everything that I built, to someone that kind of saw what the 0.1% live like and just the ridiculousness of it. And and for me, like I just had to get away from that. And so I'm trying to help lift people up across all of these strategies in a way that actually calls a spade and is not like a Dave Ramsey. And then finally, the fourth bit is how you combine all of that into a plan that you can apply in your life. Because one of my favorite YouTube comments I read in one of my comments was like, I've never watched a YouTube video that showed me exactly what to do. A lot of people talk about like kind of how to think about it, but I don't know how to implement that. And so my goal is to help you understand these different elements of money and then incorporate it into something that you can implement that helps change your money situation in whatever we're talking about. So my commitment going forward is that I'm going to start doing this in a different way. It's going to be less scripted. It's probably going to be longer form videos, less edited, and more me just talking versus trying to kind of sterilize and get everything perfect by editing and everything else. The reason I wanted to do the channel update is I don't know if this will be successful because as a new channel and with a lot of subscribers that came from the more tactical videos I've done, like the fidelity video, I'm still going to do tactical videos in a framework of a much broader money discussion. So you if you just want tactical breakdowns and you're following because you kind of see this channel as kind of like a credit card breakdown guide, I'm not really going to be that. And so at the end I just have to express my gratefulness to you if you have been a subscriber on the Money Monk channel. I started this in December of last year, so today's August 1st, so it's been 8 months, and I just have to express my appreciation and thanks because there have been so many subscribers that have been so kind to me as a new YouTuber that really help me want to keep making content. And then also how gratifying it's been to see that I'm making a positive impact in people's lives with money. And in this new chapter where I'm early retired and off of the corporate grind for now, that brings me more to satisfaction than really any amount of money that I was making in the corporate world that felt pretty soulless. So that's the channel update. That's the four things that we're focused on is mindset, behaviors, cultural impacts of money, and then tactically how you can use different tools to help you build wealth and to kind of help you reframe money in life using what I've learned over the last 15 years. So if that sounds great, I really am excited to release the new content that I'm working on because it's more frank and it's my kind of authentic self and it's a lot easier for me and enjoyable and I think it's helpful. So I appreciate you being on this journey with me. And yeah, and we'll see how it goes. So again, thanks for listening to the channel update. A big part of Money Monk is putting out content more frequently so we can build a community. So if you have questions about money or just want to talk, please feel free to leave a comment. I read all of them and I appreciate the dialogue around money. And I wish you all the best until the next video.